Help me give a nice round of applause for the gentleman that we call Wilton.
Thank you. And I share the Attorney General's, the clapping, and the governor's behind you. It's like, oh, this feels really good, right? No, but thank you. And, you know, we had an amazing session this last year for the state of Florida. We had many things in it, and clearly one of the leading things, we really respect law enforcement in this state. And so HB 1 was passed to show how much we respect our law enforcement and law and order in this state. And you've got one of the most, and I'd like to introduce him now, Chris Sprouse, very important, worked on this bill, Speaker. And did a great job. But we did so much more this year. Not only did we pass the largest expansion of school choice in the history of the country, right? Parents are now in charge of their children's education. That's in this state. Yes. If you make less than $100,000 a year, family of four, you can take your child to any education center you want to now. Charter school, private school, traditional public schools. But we put parents in charge of the education system this last year, and we had a great friend in the House to help make that happen. Our environment. This year we spent a record amount of money on our environment. The governor came in and made it a major priority of his very early on to talk about how do we fix our Everglades? How do we get to the end of this blue-green algae? How do we plan for 35 million people living here in 20 years? We need water, right? And we spent a record amount of money on our springs this year. We increased that budget by up to $75 million a year recurring. We spent several $billion on Everglades-type projects, and you will start seeing those next year come to fruition. Our C-43, 44 reservoirs, all of the reservoirs we've been building out. This year we added northern storage to that system, and you're going to see it make a big difference. And what I've always told folks is that we're going to plan all of these man-made projects, and it's going to look really good most of the time. And then Mother Nature is going to show us how little we really are, right? And there's going to be hurricanes come across our state, and it's going to look bad again. But there's nothing we can do about that, but we did all we could this year. For our environment, and we continue to do that at the governor's request and the House's request. When you look at our budget in the state of Florida, and I would compare us to the United States budget, but it's really ridiculous. So comparing us to our nearest size state of New York. In the state of New York has 19.5 million people. Their budget this year will be well in excess of $200 billion, probably $240 billion. The state of Florida's will be around, this last year was $101 billion. And so they 2.4 times as much tax collected from their citizens than we collect from ours. We're one of the lowest tax states in the union. Because of the governor's leadership through the pandemic, we opened our economy very quickly. The governor put together teams and boards that went around and said, how do we open safely, right? We lock down our most vulnerable. We take care of anyone with pre-existing conditions, and the rest of us have to go to work. Because of the governor's vision, our budgets started off $4 billion of deficit about June of last year, projections. By the time we got to the last 2 weeks of session, we were $500 million short on recurring revenue. Had we not had the governor that we had, we would have not had that major success with our budget process this year. Thank you, Governor. When we left the previous year, as the pandemic was starting, we had $4 billion of reserves, $4.5 billion. Generally, you have reserves in the state of Florida like that because if you have a hurricane, the governor can have an emergency order, and then he can spend those dollars to clear our roads, get us back in business as quickly as possible. This year when we left, we had nearly $10 billion of reserves, and because our economy continues to open so quickly, we're well over $12 billion of reserves today, and we're very proud of that. Thank you, Governor. So when you look at all of this, I have several teammates out here I want to make sure I mention tonight before I introduce the governor. We have our President Pro Tem here tonight, Aaron Bean, Senator Bean from the Jacksonville area, Nassau County. We have one of Pinellas Pasco's own, Ed Hooper. Senator Hooper's here tonight. We have our chairman of our party here tonight, Joe Gruters from Sarasota area. And then we have our own Pasco Proud. You know, he's going to Pensacola tonight, right? For drills, for military drills. Danny Burgess. And I'm going to introduce the governor. Before the governor comes up, we're going to show a short video. But with the governor, Make America Florida has become a rallying cry from freedom-loving Americans across this nation who recognize the tremendous leadership of our governor during this pandemic. And by the way, thank God for appellate courts, right? Thank God for Governor DeSantis. Thank God we live in Florida. And by the way, we have a great First Lady, too, in Casey. And we have a great First Lady of the Florida Senate, in Kathy, right? She puts up with me, so that's, you know, I don't know how she does that, but she does. These are the comments I hear from many times a day from constituents who have watched the freedoms of their friends and relatives in other states get stripped away one at a time. Our governor is standing in the breach, just like it, as a naval officer, he stood in the breach at Guantanamo Bay. He helped safeguard our nation against some of the very terrorists Joe Biden let loose. Terrorists from the same brutal and corrupt regimes are now running Afghanistan. Terrorists the Biden administration has called professional and businesslike. Think of the contrast in leadership between Washington and Tallahassee. Thanks to our governor, Florida has become a refuge for families and businesses who want to live in freedom. And thank God, Governor Ron DeSantis is just getting started. Are we ready for the video, Sean? We're going to show the video, and then I'm going to invite the governor up.
We've got to stand with the American people, and we have to put Americans first. You know, Biden last night said they may have to impose more lockdown-type policies in the future. I can tell you, that ain't happening in Florida.
So no voter ID, but have to show your medical papers just to be able to live an everyday life? Give me a break.
There's more out there for our country to achieve. We've made America great, but we can be greater still.
You're trying to tell me if there was hacked information that could damage me, you guys wouldn't print it? Give me a break. You can whiz on my leg, but don't tell me it's raining.
And while so many governors over the last year have kept locking people down, Florida lifted people up.
We here today are united in insisting that the constitutional protections central to a free society are honored for all of our citizens.
I know corporate media thinks that they can just run over people. You ain't running over this governor. I'm punching back.
Joe Biden suggests that if you don't do lockdown policies, then you should, quote, get out of the way. But let me tell you this, if you're coming after the rights of parents in Florida, I'm standing in your way. I don't want to hear a blip about COVID from you. Thank you.
Please join me in welcoming the governor of the free state of Florida, Ron DeSantis.
Hey, how are you? Hi. I didn't know I got a pyro show with me. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you so much. Special effects. Well, good evening, and I just want to say first and foremost, if Joe Biden is violating the Constitution, if Joe Biden is coming after the jobs of our citizens, if Joe Biden is trying to destroy the livelihoods of our people, I will fight back. It's great to be here. I want to thank Senator Simpson. I want to thank Speaker Sprouse, Attorney General Moody. Thanks for your leadership. And I also want to thank our great First Lady who's here with us tonight. You know, people will sometimes ask me, hey, what have you learned since being governor? And I think that they expect something like, well, you know, in a hurricane, this happens. And obviously there are a lot of lessons to be learned. But the first thing that comes to mind is we have a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 17-month-old running around the governor's mansion. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, what have we learned? In the state dining room with the 19th century French wallpaper, you can get finger paint off it. You can get slime off it. Just takes a little elbow grease. We had 2 kids when we moved in after getting elected. Now we have 3. We had a pretty good man-to-man defense there for a while. We had to switch to zone defense. We play a very loose zone defense, so we allow a lot of chaos up until the point where they start damaging the china around the governor's mansion. That's when we have to step in. So, but I appreciate all she's done, not only for me as a great wife and a great mother for our kids, but really making a difference in Florida on a whole host of issues involving mental health and substance abuse. And so she's made a tremendous difference. You look at what's going on, and Biden, I mean, it's almost sad how pathetic this presidency has been. He's got so many problems. He's failing on all fronts. And yet he is obsessed with attacking the state of Florida and attacking me as much as he can. And if he had spent a little less time on that and more time safeguarding the lives of our troops, we probably wouldn't have lost 13 service members. But he targets Florida, but I think understandably, because I think what we represent here is a threat to his leftist agenda and his leftist policies. And he knows if Florida succeeds, as people want to flood in here for freedom, he knows that his policies will fail. And so if you think about some of the things he wants to do, they want to basically federalize the elections, federalize ballot fraud and all this other stuff. What have we done in Florida? In 2020, we ran the most efficient, transparent election in the entire country. We had 11 million votes counted by midnight. You know, I had to remove the Palm Beach supervisor. We had to take care of Broward. We had to make some changes early on. But at the end of the day, we didn't throw out all the rules when COVID hit. We ran, we followed it, and people have confidence in the result. But we also have enough foresight to know there's a lot that can go wrong, as we saw throughout the rest of the country. So we were able to pass, and the legislature passed, and I signed the strongest election integrity package in the country this year. We banned ballot harvesting in the state of Florida. We said we strengthened voter ID requirements. We said you're not sending out unsolicited mail ballots. You'll have people that haven't even lived in some of these states for 5 years and they're getting ballots sent to them. So you're not doing that in Florida. And we banned Zuckerbucks. We're not going to let people like Zuckerberg hijack these elections. So in Florida, your vote counts. You're going to have a very transparent process, and we are leading the nation in election integrity, and we're proud of that. We're going to continue doing it. We also are a state, since I've been governor, we've taken very seriously problems like illegal immigration. I was happy to sign a ban on sanctuary cities during my first year in office. We've also, with the Attorney General, we're also suing Biden because he's releasing criminal aliens who should be sent back to their home country. And so we're in court, and we're going to win that against Biden, just like they want about the Remain in Mexico. I also got a request from Texas a few months ago because they're being overwhelmed because of Biden's failed border policies. They needed help. It's an emergency. They've sent us help in the past. We just sent people to Louisiana after that hurricane. So we sent some state law enforcement officers, and I got to go out there and look. It is a total catastrophe. People are pouring across the border in record numbers. It is not mostly or even close to Mexicans. These are people from over 100 different countries. When I was there were people from Africa, the Middle East, there were Haitians, you name it, all across the world. They know with Biden being president, if they just get to that southern border, they can come to the country illegally and be fine. And oh, by the way, Biden wants to force Americans to have to take a vaccine, even if they don't want to do it. But he's not making the illegal immigrants take it. They can come right on into our country. So you see the failures, and we're fighting back on that. We help Texas. We help stop some of the flow. We're going to be doing more here in the coming weeks because this is going to be a major problem for our country going forward. We also, you look at Biden. Remember what they were saying last summer when they had the BLM riots? People like Kamala Harris were raising money to bail out the rioters from jail. They were not condemning what was going on. In Florida, when that was going on, I immediately called out the National Guard. We were not going to let that happen in the state of Florida. We were ready. We stood by our law enforcement. We never bought into the anti-law enforcement ideology that you saw that people were doing, the media was promoting and all this. We said, you know what? We're standing by the people that wear the uniform because anytime people are in jeopardy, those are the folks that we rely on to keep us safe and to help us. And so they mentioned passing, we passed a bill that basically said to local governments, you are not going to be permitted to defund law enforcement in the state of Florida. We're going to make sure that law enforcement's funded. And we're going to make sure that people that are committing this type of violence are going to be held accountable. You know, in Portland, they just take your mugshot, slap you on the wrist, and put you back out. They do it over and over again where they're doing it. We're not going to accept that in the state of Florida. And here's what's happened. You go back last year, you saw these cities that reduced funding for law enforcement. And the funding's important, but honestly, when they don't have any support from the leadership, the moral support, it causes morale to go down. People aren't comfortable doing their job. Crime goes up. I mean, it has gone through the roof in a lot of these jurisdictions, and actually some of them are now begging to refund the police because they know what insane policies that they got snookered into. So we're not doing that in Florida. We need to have safe communities, and that means we're going to stand with the men and women. And as Senator Simpson mentioned, we did $1,000 bonuses for all first responders in the state of Florida this past year. And, you know, it's always good. I mean, you know, who doesn't want to make more, you know, $1,000? Great. I mean, it's important, and people will use that wisely, I'm sure. But most of the folks that have thanked me for this, it's not about the money. The fact that they got a check for $1,000, it's less about that than the fact that we stand with them, and that shows that we care about what they're doing for us. And that makes all the difference. Senator Simpson mentioned some of the fiscal differences. I mean, what Biden and them are doing is a joke, what they want to do. I mean, there's no, at all, any type of discipline. You know, in Florida, as he mentioned, a state like New York that has millions of people fewer than us, they have over twice the size of the budget that we do. But if you ever go there, do they have better infrastructure than us? No. Do they have better services? No. Try to get a driver's license there compared to in Florida. It's a lot easier if you're here. What about education? We outperform them in K through 12 education, and we have the top-ranked public university system in the United States 4 years in a row. So it just shows you that taxing people over too much government, that is not a recipe for success. They've driven out a lot of people who are productive. People want to come to Florida and be treated better. And the result that we have is, even with the lowest per capita tax burden in the country, you know, we take in all this revenue because of all the economic activity that's happened, and we're able to meet all of our needs. But it just shows they will absolutely tax this country into oblivion if we let Biden and Bernie and all these people have their way. They're going to try to do that here coming up, and hopefully they won't do it. But Florida will be standing against that, absolutely. We're going to make sure that we're a free state with low taxes. I think if you look what's going on, one of the things that is most troubling to me is it seems like I got into politics. I got elected to Congress almost 10 years ago, and that was 2012. And my mission was to kind of go in and oppose Obama, right? I even wrote a book, which about a dozen people have read, that talked about how that was not a good vision for America, and it wasn't consistent with the founders' understanding of Republican government and constitutional principles and all that. And I believe all that, and I think that there were some big fights back then. But I look at that, and that's almost quaint compared to what we're seeing right now. Because if you're somebody that just believes in traditional American principles and values, man, you are under assault across this country with all these institutions. Many of them are advocating a woke ideology. So if you look at, of course, the universities, many of them have gone off the rails. You look at the corporate press, they're basically regime-controlled media where they're basically creating narratives to benefit the ruling class. You look at big tech and what they're doing to try to impose an orthodoxy on this country. And you look at big business. And look at what big business is doing to be very political. In fact, when we did the election bill, Georgia had done their election bill about a month before. And you remember there was this huge outcry. I don't know why. I mean, Georgia ran a horrible election. They needed to do better. They needed big reforms, and so it was good that they did it. So they're doing voter ID. They're doing some basic stuff. The left is going berserk. The media is going berserk. And these companies were getting pressured. And even though they couldn't tell you what was wrong with the legislation, they all came out and they're attacking Georgia. They're attacking voter ID. They're doing this. Major League Baseball even moved the All-Star game out of Atlanta over a bill for voter ID. And so they're doing all this. And it's almost as if they think that if they just bend to the mob, then everything's going to be fine and they can just move on. First of all, that's not true. The minute you bend the knee, they're coming back after you next time and again and again and again because they know you're weak. So it's not even good business. But I think they think it's just the path of least resistance. And so there was a whole hullabaloo. So our bill's moving through the Florida, and ours was much stronger than what they did in Georgia. And so, and there was a lot of people were, creating false narratives. They were trying to do it on the left and the press and all this stuff. And I just let it be known. I said, look, you're in business, corporation, you obviously can, it's a free country. If you want to get involved in these disputes, if you want to foment false narratives, if you want to attack me or anybody else, you can do that. It's a free country, and I'm not going to tell you not to. But just understand, if you come after us, if you're parroting false narratives about us, if you're attacking legislation we're doing on false premises, I'm fighting back against you. This virtue signaling is not going to be cost-free. We'll discuss some of your business practices. You're doing business with the communist Chinese, you're doing business with Castro, you're doing business. Okay, let's talk about that. And I think that that's important that we take that stand. And what happened was, I signed the election integrity bill, the left had a spasm, the media had a spasm. The corporations didn't say a word. Because they know in Florida, I'm fighting back against you if you're coming after us. And so it's a lesson in dealing with wokeness. Wokeness is rejected by the vast, vast majority of the American people, but it's something that is really taken a hold of a lot of elite institutions. So it's a mile wide in our society because of all those institutions, but it's an inch deep. And if you stand up and you fight back, you will win these battles. And we won on election integrity. We also won on protecting women's sports, which was something that we were being criticized. The NCAA said they weren't going to host events in Florida if we protected women's sports. And I'm sorry, I have two daughters. They have a right to play sports fairly. They shouldn't have to compete against boys if that's, to maintain the integrity of the competition. So we felt strongly about it. We did it. And, a week or two later, the NCAA was asked, are you going to not do Florida? Oh, we didn't actually say we wouldn't do Florida and all this stuff. And so, it's just, you got to stand your ground. Don't let these people bully you and do what's right. We also saw that with what we did in Florida involving, we banned critical race theory in our K through 12 schools. And it was easy for me because I'm looking at this, and this is insane ideology, historically false, and basically just trying to create false narratives. And I said and believe, we are not going to spend one penny of taxpayer dollars teaching kids to hate our country or to hate each other. That has no place in Florida, and we're going to fight back. But as important as it is to say we're against that, I also think it's important to say what you're for. And so we've worked really hard to increase American civics in our schools, particularly our high schools in the state of Florida. We have it back in high school. We have the key things that need to be taught. We're going to be eventually doing tests for all graduating seniors, similar to a citizenship test that a naturalized immigrant would have to pass, so that you look to see what are the core principles of our country. And we also did a program to establish a civic boot camp for teachers. So you can go do a program, which will be real stuff, no ideology, and we'll give the teacher a $3,000 bonus if they go through the program. And so we're doubling down on let's teach these kids what makes America unique. Let's teach them about our constitutional system. Let's teach them about the Bill of Rights and all the key moments in American history, and they will be better off for that. We're preparing kids for a lot of different stuff. I mean, I'm big on vocational education. I don't think college is the only way to be successful. And I think you can actually make a lot of money if you go into some of these fields. So we've worked really hard in promoting the skilled trades and other things. But here's the thing. Some people will go into that. Some people will want to be bankers. Some people will want to be doctors. That's fine. You're going to have a whole host of different careers that you're going to do. But no matter what career you choose, every single one of those people is going to be called upon to discharge the duties of being a citizen. So how could it be that we've spent so long graduating people with very little knowledge about what it means to be an American? So we're changing that in Florida. Banning critical race theory is obviously an important part of that, but we got to have a positive, I think, a positive agenda there, and I think we'll be much better off for it. So stay tuned on that. I think it's going to be very exciting. The other thing I would just say is, with the anniversary of September 11th coming up tomorrow, is, that was one of my lifetime was the most significant day in the country's history since I've been alive, probably. I remember it. I mean, it changed really everything. Growing up, I grew up right down the road in Pinellas County. I graduated high school in '97. 80s and 90s were a pretty good time to be a kid, particularly after we defeated the Soviet Union in the Cold War. Our country was at peace, relatively prosperous, and it was a good time. 9/11 really changed a lot of that and changed the world. And you look about the people that were lost in the towers and at the Pentagon and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, almost 3,000. We honor their legacies and their memories. You also look at, and when you were watching it on TV at the time, I didn't appreciate it because you see the smoke coming out. Obviously, people are fleeing, but there was a lot of people wearing those uniforms that were running into the towers. They were running into the towers knowing they probably would never leave the towers because they were helping other people get out and get to safety. And so those are folks who were in the NYPD, the Port Authority, the fire department, and there were hundreds of folks, uniformed people who passed away in the towers, but they saved many, many hundreds more. And so if you don't appreciate the people that wear the uniform and you see things like that, then you are just a lost cause. So thanks to all the first responders on 9/11 and everyone who's done everything since then. We also thank the people that wore the cloth of our country in the U.S. military and have served in the post-9/11 generation. And I can tell you, as somebody who was active duty and served in Iraq, one thing that really struck me was, the biggest attack prior to 9/11 was Pearl Harbor on our country. Pearl Harbor, we got into World War II, defeated Imperial Japan, Nazi Germany, great fight, honorable fight, and really saved the world. But that was, the entire society was involved with that. People got drafted. No one was not involved in World War II in some way, shape, or form. It was a total mobilization. After 9/11, there was no draft or anything, all volunteer force. So you had a very tiny segment of our society that was actually participating in this. And that meant people would go, they'd come back, then they'd go back. Then they'd go to the other theater, and then back to the other theater. So you had people that did 3, 4, 5 deployments over a 6-7 year period, and that takes a toll. First of all, it just takes a toll. You're there more chance to get attacked, more chance to get wounded, but then the emotional and the mental toll, and obviously we've done a lot to help people with post-traumatic stress, the toll it takes on families to have their loved one gone so often. And so a very small number of people have carried a very large burden for this country since September 11th, and we ought to remember that, and we ought to thank them for their service to our country. And it's because of their sacrifice and the honor in which they conducted themselves that watching the events of the last few weeks have been all the more difficult, demoralizing, and quite frankly, humiliating for our country to see 13 service members effectively hung out to dry, because if we had a commander-in-chief that was in command, that attack would not have happened. And I feel for the families, because losing somebody under those circumstances is difficult no matter what. But in circumstances like that, where you know that the people at the top didn't have their back the way they should have, I'm sad, but I'm also angry that happened, because we lost 13 great service members that day. It's also humiliating for our country to see terrorists with American military equipment running around the country. You know, look, it's a problematic place. I mean, if I could rewind, I would have gone and routed al-Qaeda, routed Taliban, just come home rather than be there and try to create a democracy, because it's just not a place you're going to do that. So there was always going to be problems. But do you need to leave billions of dollars of military equipment for them? Do you need to gift wrap that for them? So this has been a disaster. There's still Americans that are trapped over there. And as a Navy guy, we had certain ethos. You talk to Marines. If we have Marines here, Semper Fi to you. Army, all the services have different flavors, different ethos. But every single service in our country, in our military, we all are united by one common principle: you leave nobody behind. And they left people behind, and the country's worse off for it. So we've got a lot of work to do going forward. I can tell you that, you watch, Biden, he wasn't really invested in what was going on with the service members. Honestly, his meetings with these families was a total disaster. Many of the families were very upset. This is a guy that's now threatening to ruin the lives of millions of Americans, take away their jobs, force them into destitution. Meanwhile, what? He sleeps all day and gorges himself on ice cream on the weekends. So we've got a lot wrong going on in our country, but I'll tell you, we've got a lot right going on in the state of Florida, and we're going to continue to do the people's work. But the thing that we need from elected Republicans more than any ever right now, we need people that are going to stand on the wall, that are not going to back down, that are going to display some courage under fire. It's very easy to go out there and talk about the platitudes of whatever the Republican flavor of the day is. But the question is, when the left starts firing at you, when the corporate press starts going after you, trying to smear you, 60 Minutes, some other ones you may have heard of have tried that in Florida, who's going to stand up? And who's going to fight back on behalf of the people, and who's just going to wilt into the corner because they don't want to have to face any incoming fire? And I can tell you, we need people that are going to willing to go into the fire, people that are going to be willing to walk that line and to not back down. And that's what you're going to get in the state of Florida. We will be strong. We will be resolute. We are not going to be deterred by people that don't have the best interests of this state at heart. And so it's an honor for me to be here. What they say, 60,000 vote margin in Pasco in 2020. Can we do a little even better in 2022? What do you say? So we're happy to have accomplished a lot. Wilton mentioned a bunch of stuff. Honestly, I have like a list I could go through, but it would take more than one dinner to get through all of it. So we have accomplished a lot in the state of Florida, but I can tell you this, I've only begun to fight. Thank you all. God bless you guys. Appreciate you.
One more time for the best governor in the state of Florida. Let's hear it.